terminology. Please proceed and submit your...
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm guided by the old senator. Mr. Speaker, I want to now stay away from the, as you said, I'm guided not to talk about whether or not it was against our standing orders. Mr. Speaker, I want to go ahead and say that perhaps my message is that we should continue to hold our standing orders high, Mr. Speaker, and to remember that even as we are sent out there are procedures, and we must follow them, Mr. Speaker, so that when we are tabling any report here, the report can actually be taken with the seriousness that it deserves, and that we might not be suspicious of anything, Mr. Speaker. Having said that, Mr. Speaker, I want to say that for me, it is two things that have come out. In the report, there is a whole section where we are talking about cults, the definition of cults, and all of that, Mr. Speaker. But I have not seen a recommendation where the committee then says that we are going to legislate around the illegality of cults, Mr. Speaker. Because the problem that we have is not to regulate religious institutions. The problem that we have, and I have said this before, is that we have no legal definition of what constitutes of a cult. And we have no legal definition of what constitutes of cultic behavior. So therefore, someone wants to wake up and say, and I've seen in part of the recommendations that we must, recommendation 502, where they say that we must regulate religious institutions. Mr. Speaker, I ask this, and I am a Christian, but I ask this, who is going to play God? Who will now come and say, I am God, and I'm going to regulate Seventh-day Adventists, and from today you must eat meat? Or who is going to come in and say, I am God, I'm going to regulate the Catholics, and you are not going to use the rosaries and whatnot? Mr. Speaker, it is completely insane that, and this I find very disappointing, that a whole committee can sit down and say, let us regulate religious institutions. Where do you start, Mr. Speaker? Who will now act God? Who will decide that the Catholics have actually...
Senator Mungatana, what is your point
Mr.
of order?
Speaker, I must be protected. Those are frivolous points of order.
No, it's not for you to determine, Senator Orwoba.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is obvious, Mr. Speaker, that the Honorable Senator who is addressing us has not read the report, has not understood what self-regulation is or regulation of religious organization is all about. Mr. Speaker, when you're talking about religious organization and regulation of them, you're not talking about rosaries. You're not talking about telling them to eat meat or not to eat meat. Mr. Speaker, and someone using words like insane, and you are the one who has not understood what we are talking about. Mr. Speaker, if you don't have content, please allow other senators who want to debate.
Speaker. That is contemptuous.
That is what we are talking about.
Senator Orwoba.
Yes. Contemptuous.
That's wrong.
What is your point of order, Senator Eddy?
Mr. Speaker, you know, I'm rising under point of order number 105. Actually read together with 101. Because, you know, Senator Gloria has used terms like it is insane that this committee would make certain recommendation, which for me, it borders, you know, throwing aspersions on the entire committee, actually, on the entire individuals who are in this committee, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, you know, if you are going to take a section of the report, a line that perhaps was sometimes a summary, Mr. Speaker, the committee has provided to this House an entire legislative proposal in that report.
Point of order.
I'm on a point of order. What is wrong, Mr. Speaker, with the Senator? Mr. Speaker, there is an entire legislative proposal on how to handle the misgivings that we are seeing in the religious institutions. If you haven't read this report, Mr. Speaker, then how can we have even a dialogue in this House? And Mr. Speaker, I want to beg Mr. Speaker, the members of the House, that the issue of Shakahola is not a theater for drama or a theater for some cheap popularity on the floor of this house. Because there are serious lives that were lost. I would wish that as honorable senators, we can be able to discuss the issues you have raised in a way that can be able to give even some families who haven't buried their beloved ones some solace. I beg of the senators that let us not use it as a theater of politics and a theater of drama. When you have a report in your hand, they are very well detailed stuff, and actually there is a whole legislative proposal with regards to what you are quoting. So take your time, go read, come back to the house, and then you are able to contribute meaningfully. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator John Methu, what is your point of order?
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. I also note, because I think many people want to contribute to this particular motion. I am also here, I want to contribute. But I'm raising on Standing Order 114 on imputing improper motives on your colleagues. I know the Honorable Senator Mungatana is worked up because they have committed a lot of their time, a lot of their energy trying to look at this report. But as it is in the rules of debate, we must be tolerant to each other. You must tolerate my thoughts. You must tolerate my thinking. That is the reason why this report has to be brought to the House, so that we can debate and we can enrich it and we can share our mind. So, Honorable Speaker, I find it, and you must find the Honorable Senator Mungatana out of order by number one, imputing that Senator Gloria has not read the report, because he has no evidence that he has not read. That is, please allow them, allow me to just make my final comment.
Yes.
Honorable Speaker,
yes.
You must then also find him out of order to impute that Senator Gloria does not have content, because he said. He actually said, Honorable Speaker, that if you do not have content, then sit down and allow the other people. Honorable Speaker, you must find the chair of the Select Committee, Honorable Danson Buya Mugatana, out of order. And he must withdraw, apologize, and take his time.
Allow us to debate the report.
Senator Mungatana, you had already made a point of order. Go ahead, make your point of order.
Mr. Speaker,
because you mentioned him specifically.
yes, so I have a right of reply. Honorable Senator John Methu has said that there might have, I said that Senator Gloria has not read. Mr. Speaker, there was a great member of parliament here, Jean-Marie Sorone, who said, this house, when he was challenged to substantiate, he said, you cannot substantiate the obvious. Mr. Speaker, when someone stands and starts saying regulation of churches is to tell them not to eat meat if you are SDA, that's a person who has not read the report. When you say the Catholics should not use the rosary, that's a person who has not read the report. He's completely out of order because he's misinforming the public using this prime podium, Mr. Speaker, to say things that are not in the report. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to quote again for the satisfaction of Honorable Senator Methu that we cannot substantiate the obvious. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
What is your point of order, Senator Cherargei?
Mr. Speaker, as you rule, Mr. Speaker, as I agree that every member has a right to raise on a point of order. Is it in order for the Senator Danson Buya Mungatana to assert that there are members of Senate who do not have content or have not read? Does he have readometer? Does he have readometer, Mr. Speaker, to know who has read which level or read, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, the rules of debate, in conclusion, Mr. Speaker, the rules of debate, the reason this report was brought before the floor of the House, Mr. Speaker, with a lot of tremendous respect, was for us to debate on it. If the committee felt that some of us would not give an opinion of what they did, then what is the reason we're having this debate? Mr. Speaker, I'm saying the Senator Mungatana should be ruled totally out of order. Not only out of order, Mr. Speaker, because you cannot be saying and casting aspersions. You can imagine, as he said, we have the prime platform. You can imagine Kenyans will now believe that Senator Gloria Orwoba does not have content. Yet we know Mr. Senator Gloria Orwoba is one of the finest senators in this house, Mr. Speaker. You must protect your members, Mr. Speaker. We don't want Senator Gloria to be harassed on the streets because Senator Mungatana says she's one of the best and finest, Mr. Speaker, that we have.
Can I contribute?
Senator Mazayo and Senator Eddy, you cannot direct the chair.
Correct. It should be thrown out.
Honorable senators, I would like to refer you to Standing Order 101, and this is specifically for Senator Orwoba while you're making your submission, that it shall be out of order to introduce an argument on specific questions upon which 1013. It shall be out of order to use offensive or insulting language, whether in respect of senators or other persons. As you are making a submission, try to use parliamentary language and avoid attracting this point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Just one moment, Senator Orwoba. Senator Orwoba, just one moment. I also refer you all to Standing Order 1014.
Yes.
No senator shall impute improper motive to any other senator or to a member of the National Assembly.
Yes.
Please be guided with these standing orders.
Correct.
You have 5 minutes, Senator Orwoba.
Mr. Speaker, I have read the report, Mr. Speaker. I have read the report in depth. As a matter of fact, I've been waiting to contribute to this motion since Wednesday. And on Thursday, I sat here until 6:30, Mr. Speaker, when time was up. Yesterday, I was also waiting to contribute, Mr. Speaker. I can see that they've put the light on, yet my time has been taken. Mr. Speaker, in the recommendation that the committee has put out, recommendation 502, may I read it? It is on page 155, Mr. Speaker. It says, the committee recommends, this committee, the ad hoc committee that was put out, that committee recommends that Parliament enacts the proposed religious organization bill to provide a legislative framework for the regulation of religious organizations. Mr. Speaker, it is to that point that I am actually contributing and saying, who will play God? Who will be the regulator of this religious institution? Because that person must be a higher being. That person must be greater than the religious institutions. So that person essentially must be God. And Mr. Speaker, that is what I'm saying. When a committee has sat and said that this is the recommendation, I am now asking, because, Mr. Speaker, I am specially elected, and I'm specially elected by women, Mr. Speaker. And those women are asking me here to come and say, while we are putting and legislating and saying we are going to regulate the religious institutions.
Senator Orwoba, if I could interrupt you. You read page 151?
I read page 155. Regulation 502, where they have recommendation. The same report that has been given to me that I have been, interrogating, Mr. Speaker. I can repeat. The committee recommends that Parliament enacts the proposed religious organization bill to provide a legislative framework for the regulation of religious organizations. Further, establishment of the Office of the Registrar of Religious Organizations, registration framework, qualification of religious leaders, offenses and penalties for non-compliance, among others. Mr. Speaker, I am then asking, and particularly to the chair of this committee, because I have read, by the way, Mr. Speaker, I went to St. George's High School. It's not a small school. I'm very well aware of what I'm doing here, Mr. Speaker. I am just asking, who will play God? Is a question, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I do not want to go further on that. Kindly, Mr. Speaker, my time. I want to talk about another recommendation that they have put here, Mr. Speaker, which is on the social media. They talk about cleansing social media. They say that the social media platforms, there's even a directive to Communication Authority to be able to regulate the licenses that are being given. Mr. Speaker, the moment we are regulating licenses of particularly religious institutions, Mr. Speaker, then we might as well start regulating also music. because we do not want certain stations be given licenses to play reggae, because who knows what we think about reggae, Mr. Speaker. The moment we start talking about religious institutions being treated in a certain manner under licenses for, selling the gospel and bringing in, followers of Jesus, Mr. Speaker, then where do you stop? Because we'll also say that we will be regulating other content, Mr. Speaker. And all I am saying is that, and if my fellow senator, the chair of the committee, would actually just be tolerant to divergent views, Mr. Speaker, that we are giving, then he'll understand that when I was saying that regulating religious institution, for him it might not mean that necessarily regulating the basic nitty-gritties. But what are you going to regulate if not the activities of the religious institutions? You must regulate the activities, because Shakahola happened, and I repeat, because of cults. We have not legally defined a cult, and we have not made it illegal for certain actions to be defined as cultic actions, Mr. Speaker. So then my submission is, instead of going to the religious institution, come here and give us recommendations of how we are going to define the cultic practices, so that anyone who's seen doing a certain activity, we can immediately point out and say, hey, that is a cult, that is a practice, and that is illegal, that person must be arrested. But coming to tell us that we are going to regulate religious institutions, Mr. Speaker, and using parliamentary language, for me, I will say that it is not proper, Mr. Speaker. So therefore, I want to submit and say that perhaps if the Senate ad hoc committee was not too quick to start.
I will add you 1 minute to conclude.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If they were not too quick to start poking holes on other things, I've heard that the cabinet secretary was apparently an impediment in so many things, but they could have come and talked to us, religious people, who actually understand what it means, so that we could have weighed in and given them all these things that we think would help in the report, Mr. Speaker. So therefore, I do not support this report, Mr. Speaker, and I still stand that this is a house of procedures, and procedures must be followed. No senator is bigger than another senator, Mr. Speaker. No, he could be older, I could be younger, but the standing orders and the proceedings, they are there for all of us, Mr. Speaker. I beg not to support this report.
Well done.